Hi, welcome to Sew Together Tuesdays. I'm Teresa Coates. I'm the National Educator for Shannon Fabrics, and today we are continuing our journey with Pat the Penguin, and we are making his feet. So if you want to make some feet for your Pat the Penguin, stick around. Our supplies for the project are obviously what comes in our Pat the Penguin kit. So you have the orange piece in here that will be included for it. The rust color is what we're calling that. You're going to cut two 5x7s for each of the feet. Okay, so I've got those cut out for us, and I've also got our pieces of batting for that as well. So we need to have our Wonder Clips. We're going to use some nuts for our pattern weights. I've got a permanent felt tip pen, my Famore scissors. I've got a point turner that I'll be using as well as my stiletto. We're using our stretch 9014 needles from Schmetz. These are Superior's thread polyester. It's a so fine. And then of course our clover pins. So that's all we're gonna need for today's project. So let's get started. All right, so first I've got my pieces cut out, so 5x7, and I'm just gonna bring one over here. What I need to do is make sure that the nap is going the right direction. So if I pet it this way, it looks nice. If I do it this way, it's clearly backwards. So this is my top to bottom. Okay, and I'm just gonna turn this over and I'm gonna put the pattern on in the same direction, going from top to bottom. All right, I'm just gonna put my little guys out here and trace around this pattern piece. Fine, this is just gonna be my stitching line. So once I've got that traced on there, so I'm gonna make sure that my nap's going the correct direction here, put these right sides together, and then I'm gonna stack that on top of one piece of batting. I'm gonna pin these in place, and we're gonna use that line that I drew as the stitching line. So I wanna make sure that it's gonna get caught by the batting, and then all I'm gonna do is pin a few times around it. So I'm going to pin in the middle to make sure it stays there. And then I want to pin outside of those stitching lines. What I found is that if I do that, I can actually stitch these curves pretty easily because it sort of uses the batting as a stabilizer. I just need to keep them all in check together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this over the sewing machine and sew this up. So I've got it on a straight stitch at 3.5 stitch length, just like I want. And now I'm going to back stitch. Well, it's probably going to do a lock stitch for me because that's what it likes to do. And then I'm just going to sew all around. So when I have these pins in here, I actually can use them as a guide, and I can make the fabric do what I want it to. I'm just going to stitch all the way around. So I'm going to leave all of those pins in there, and being flower head pins, they're easy enough to stitch right over as long as I don't sew on the metal part. So every once in a while I have to move the fabric, pick that foot up. It's all right, okay? And we're just gonna pivot and go around this next toe. So you just wanna take it nice and slow. Don't try to hurry around it. And remember that that line that you drew is the stitching line and not the cutting line. Okay, one more. You can see I'm just slowly turning the fabric as I go. It makes for a much smoother corner there, okay? And I got off my line just a little. That's all right. Move that out of the way and come on up. And I'm not going to sew this top one because I'm leaving that top open so I can use it to turn. Okay, I'm going to back stitch and then cut my thread. All right, so now I'll take my pins out, those back, and then I'm just going to trim around this entire thing. We're going to trim it really nice and close so it'll turn easily. I'm going to trim the batting so that it's super duper close. Trim that all the way off because I don't want any of that poking up extra. It's already thick enough, so I want to get it down just to the stitching line so we don't have too much extra in there that has to turn underneath for these corners, because these corners are pretty tight. These are also micro serrated scissors, which is what you want when you're cutting with this stuff because it'll grab it a little bit better. Makes it easier to cut. The micro serration is really important for ease of cutting. Okay, and you can see I just need to cut a little bit at a time because I've got these tight little corners. Just gonna work my way around all the way up to the top. And now I'm gonna trim off the cuddle. I can get that off. All right, there we go. All right, and so now I'll trim down the cuddle so that it's about 1/4 of an inch or a little bit less. And this doesn't have to be super neat, doesn't have to be perfect because it's just gonna hide inside. All right, so now the only other thing that we need to do, besides get that second layer, is to come back in here with the toes. And so where it comes up here, if we don't clip up to that stitching line, it's not gonna turn right. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your scissors and you're gonna clip right up to the stitching line. Okay, but you don't wanna clip through the stitching line, so be real careful about that. If you do accidentally clip through it, just go back over and sew again. just past it so that you haven't clipped it. Okay, so now we've got our little spots here, little clips in there, and now we're just gonna turn it inside out. Helps if you turn it right sides. There we go. Push those out. You can use your point turner for that. Bring that guy in here and just push them out. Make sure it's nice and smooth. All right, little feet. All right, now I'm just gonna go back to the machine. I'm gonna zigzag across the top of here. I'm gonna mark these, and if you want, you can totally stitch these. I'm gonna do it on one and not on the other so I can show you the difference, okay? But all we're gonna do is stitch between the toes, basically. So I just mark it with a pin so I can see it where I wanna stitch, and then I'm gonna mark it this direction to see where I wanna stop. So I want those to be even. It's sometimes hard to mark on the Cuddle, so I tend to mark a lot of things with pins. All right, let's go back to the machine and sew this down. Okay, so the first thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna switch it back to a zigzag, a nice big zigzag, and we're gonna close up this top edge just to hold it in place so that when we put it onto the body of the penguin, it's easy to do because it's all become one piece. All right, so I'm gonna clip that, and then I'm gonna come sew its toes. And the way that I do that is I'm gonna start in here. I'm gonna change it to a straight stitch. My needle is in the middle, so I'm gonna put my needle down. There we go. Now I wanna butt it right up so that the needle bumps right into that little valley between the toes, okay? I'm gonna give it one crank so we can get it into the fabric. Yeah, because I want it to grab the fabric before I start sewing. Now I'm gonna make sure it does a lock stitch, and then I'm gonna stitch forward until I get to that line. Okay, and I'm just kind of eyeballing it to see that it's going fairly straight. And I'm watching real carefully to see where my pin is because I don't want to stitch over it. So I'm gonna do a couple more stitches and then I'm gonna knot it off again. Okay, and then I clip my thread. I'm gonna go back over and do the same thing on the other toe. Okay, so I'm gonna put this needle down this way so that I can make it bump right up to where I want it to be. Put the foot down, crank it forward with the hand crank, just a little to get it just grabbing the fabric, okay? And then I'm gonna do another lock and do the same thing as I move forward to that pin that I marked the line with. I'm gonna look over here, make sure that they're about even. Take my pin out so I don't hit it. I'll forward a few more stitches, and then I'm gonna do another lock stitch. Clip my threads, and our foot's done. Okay, so now we've got our feet finished. You can do it either way. You can see his big toes go out is how they'll go on. You can do it with the extra stitching or without. Either way works. So thanks for joining us for today's episode of Sew Together Tuesday. If you like what you're seeing, make sure that you like or subscribe. You can join us next week. We'll continue on with Pat the Penguin, and we're gonna put his body together next week. So I'm excited about that. And until then, happy sewing.